Welcome to Crime on Caffeine. I'm your host, Erica.
And I'm your host, Allison. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode. Today we be sipping on a local coffee to me. We are sipping on Bandit Coffee Company. They are in St. Petersburg, Florida, if anybody wants to visit their actual store. But you can order online, which is what we did have to do. I got the half-caffed blend because, guys, your girl drinks a little too much coffee, and I thought maybe to wean myself off, this might be a good start to just half-caff myself and not full calf.
Maybe you won't even notice. Maybe I'll...
Well, today I kind of noticed.
Okay.
I'm like, well, it takes time.
Yeah, you'll get used to it.
Yeah, but I did have to go all the way to the local Target to get my dairy-free creamers because they don't sell the dairy-free Starbucks ones at Publix, and it's really pissing me off.
I feel like Target has a lot. I just got the debit card, and I'm so excited. I feel like it's just going to, give me excuse to shop there more, which I don't need to do. But I decided my project for 2022 is building a cute coffee bar area.
Ooh.
Because we have a Keurig now, but it broke when we move in, and it's hanging on by a thread. So we want to upgrade to an espresso machine. And so I want to make a cute little coffee bar cart type thing and make it all cute
so
with
much
the little
fun.
syrups and stuff. I see that all over TikTok.
I was just about to say, you're so TikTok.
I'm so excited, but it's going to be a project because I don't want to go crazy and spend a bunch of money I don't have at once. So,
see, you're good about that. I'm not.
No, I'm not.
I want a bar cart, and then I just spend all my money on it.
I literally filled my cart in preparation already on Target. This is what I'm going to want one day this year. They don't. Klarna gets me all with H&M. I can't.
Every time I see that little pink box, I'm like, oh, perfect. But yes, Bandit Coffee is fabulous, and hopefully one day I will not be heavily addicted to caffeine. But right now, we are not on that path. So I'm going to continue my addiction. Thank you.
For the sake of the show.
Yes. Hi, I'm Allison. I'm addicted to coffee.
Yeah, well, I got the staple blend, and it's really good. Okay, wait, I had a question for you. Do you like fruity blends or chocolatey, rich blend? I don't know.
Yeah, I like a mixed bag. So you can have the caramel, the milk chocolate, all those goody two-shoe flavors in there. But if you want to throw in a strawberry flavor, I'm not going to be upset about it.
Yes.
You know?
That's the one that I'm drinking right now is it's got
milk
chocolate, strawberry, and yeah, so good.
I know, I want to try that one so bad. I'm going to order it next. Or maybe if, maybe Bandit, if you're listening and you check your DMs on Instagram.
Yeah.
Open our DM. Yeah, we would love to, we'd love to make this a two-way street here. Do we have any true crime news?
We do. I want to talk a little bit about the Lauren Smith Fields case.
I have been waiting for this update.
Yeah, a couple of people have been asking for it. If you hadn't heard the original update, Lauren Smith Fields was a 23-year-old Black woman from Bridgeport, Connecticut. She was found dead in her apartment in December after meeting a man from Bumble. So basically, the police totally mishandled the investigation. They failed to notify the family of Lauren's death. Just this last week, they ended up ruling the death an accident and saying that it was a result of an overdose from fentanyl combined with prescription meds and then alcohol. They've opened a further investigation because originally, when they first talked to the man that she went on the date with, because he's the one who called 911, they didn't bring him in for further questioning because they said he was a nice guy. We didn't find out the man until just in the last couple of weeks, I think. No real news sources are really reporting on his name because no charges were brought. But so that's not the only thing. So on December 14th, the family of another Black woman in Bridgeport, her name was Brenda Lee Rawls. I think she was in her like early 50s. They heard from a neighbor that Brenda had died. No police officer or anyone like contacted them to tell them that she died. So they went looking everywhere, but they couldn't find her body. And they called the police department, they called the hospitals, the funeral homes, everywhere. And then they finally found her 2 days after she had died at the ME's office. And according to Brenda's sister, Dorothy, she said that they literally had to do their own investigation because the police, like I said, never notified them of her death. So it's just like Lauren's family didn't notify them of the death of Lauren's death. They literally found out from Lauren's landlord writing a note, and they went in her bedroom and saw the bloody sheets and everything. They did not investigate whatsoever. Her bloody sheets were just there chilling.
What?
When does that ever happen?
No.
And these two women died on the same day. They learned of the detective Angel Llanos, who'd been assigned to her case. Dorothy said that she left him at least 4 messages regarding her sister's death, but he never returned them, or regarding her sister's whereabouts, but he never returned them. The detective, along with Detective Kevin Cronin, the detective who was assigned to Lauren's case, were both suspended, and they will remain on leave until an internal investigation is completed. But I just want to talk about the Bridgeport Police Department for a moment. So straight away, we've got a year ago in April, so last spring, a federal judge sentenced the former police chief, Armando Perez, to a year and 1 day in prison. He was accused of rigging the selection process to ensure his spot as the chief of police, and then he lied to the FBI about it. So he just like essentially worked with, I think it was like the director of city personnel or like something like that, to be able to cheat on his exams and things. And it was this whole inside job. It was really
Situation.
fucked up. It was a whole situation. The charges against him were conspiracy to commit wire fraud and making false statements to the FBI. So like I said, he's serving a year and 1 day in prison. He also must pay upwards of about $300,000 in restitution to the city and complete 100 hours of community service. I think the guy that he worked with also has to pay the $300,000 to the city. So that's just setting the tone. Obviously, if you can imagine, that is your police chief. This is the person in charge of everyone. He creates the culture. He creates, everything. So that's him. Along with this, in the last 5 years, at least 14 people, so this includes people from outside of the police department and employees within the police department, at least 14 of them filed complaints or lawsuits against the Bridgeport Police Department for civil rights violations. So like excessive force, like against a person of color, and obviously like discrimination. So like I said, they weren't just from civilians. 2 of the complaints came from the only 2 Black captains at the Bridgeport Police Department. They accused the department of being a racist and hostile work environment. I believe this just happened like in the last year recently, but in 2018, a former captain resigned after some texts were leaked where he called Juneteenth an N-word parade. And those weren't even like the only texts that were leaked. Before this, They found conversations of him. He was like texting one of his colleagues a conversation that he had with another Black officer. This Black officer was in the running for police chief, but he was telling his friend, he said, it was like a joke about Planet of the Apes, and he was like, does it make you feel homesick watching it? Like, yeah, so terrible. But there was also texts of him saying he hates Black people, calling them a cancer, and saying that he hopes for a race war. So like this guy is
for one.
Yeah. He tried to justify his behavior by saying that it was coming from a widespread culture created by the former chief. 1, we're not surprised. 2, that makes it okay? No, that doesn't make it okay.
I was just about to say, that excuses absolutely nothing. So that's good.
So you know how I said one of the captains who complained, which was the Black officer, he made that Planet of the Apes joke too, or joke that he thinks it was. So his name is Roderick Porter. Like I said, finalist for police chief in 2018. So he obviously came forward with this complaint, and he said that the agency knew about the text and like tried to hide it at first, and they completely failed to properly investigate what had happened. And so he steps down, and Porter was the only remaining candidate left for police chief, and they literally picked someone else. And it was found that the woman that they picked was also her getting promoted, also was part of this whole deal with the exam rigging that the police chief had to step down for. So that was corruption. They're currently appealing the decision to promote her, and the mayor said that he wants a list of candidates in the next like 150 days or like something like that. So they're figuring that out. So thank God that lady's coming down.
That's a lot to ingest.
Yeah. According to city council member Maria Pereira, allegations of police brutality have cost the city millions of dollars within the last few years alone. She said to BuzzFeed, "It's constant here. Civil rights violations, shooting people in the back, kicking people in the face while they're down, pistol whipping young people when their backs are turned. Our police department is in shambles at every level. It's not functioning." Within the Bridgeport Police Department, there's one black detective. 80% of police leaders are white. None of the 7 leadership positions within the police department is held by black officers. So that's just a little bit of background. BuzzFeed wrote a pretty insane article just like talking about all of the complaints against them and all of the police brutality incidents that their police officers have been involved in. Some of the stories are just, it's
Probably
unbelievable.
insane.
So I highly recommend reading that article. I'm not going to go through the details of like every single incident here because there's sadly a lot of them, but just to kind of give you guys an idea of this police department, they just have a very bad history, clearly. But officers responded to a 911 call placed at Lauren's apartment on December 12th and discovered upon arrival that she'd passed away unexpectedly. She was found lying on her back on the floor with dried blood in and around her right nostril. According to this man she went on a date with, 37-year-old white man, he met her on Bumble 3 days earlier. Lauren invited him over. They took shots of tequila. She felt sick, began to throw up, went to the bathroom, came back. They kept drinking, playing games, chilled and watched movies, and then she fell asleep. He says he carried her to bed and fell asleep next to her. He said that she was snoring when he woke up early to use the bathroom, and then he woke up again at like 6:30 and she wasn't breathing. She had blood coming out of her nose. So he called the police department. He was doing like chest compressions. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
He was doing those on the phone, but I think she was dead when police arrived. But whether or not Lauren went to the bathroom and took drugs and overdosed, or this guy gave her drugs and overdosed, or this guy did some sketchy shit, I have no idea what happened. I'm not saying anything. Obviously, this is an open investigation, so police aren't going to tell us anything too early, but this woman and her family deserved a true and proper investigation. They deserved to be told that their daughter was dead and in their hands. She deserved her death to be investigated as soon as her body was found, and because of that, we may never truly know what happened.
Well, keep us updated on that one because I know there will probably be several more updates on that case. But for now, I have a confession to make.
Okay.
I lied to you.
Why?
I told Erica that I was doing a murder today, but I wanted to surprise her because I am doing an unsolved case.
Is it an unsolved murder?
It is an unsolved murder. But I know. I was like, I'm not going to tell her it's unsolved. Today we are going to be covering the unsolved murder of Dorothy Jane Scott. Dorothy Jane Scott was a single mother living in Stanton, California, with her aunt and 4-year-old son. She was 32 years old and a secretary for 2 jointly owned Anaheim stores. Her coworkers and friends all shared that she was a homebody, a devoted Christian, and didn't drink or do drugs. Her parents, who lived in Anaheim, babysat their grandson, aka her son, while she was away at work. Dorothy's father, Jacob, said his daughter may have dated on occasion but had no steady boyfriend, and as far as the family was aware, she didn't date usually. On May 27th, 1980, 32-year-old Dorothy Jane Scott dropped her son, Shanti, off at her parents' house and went to a company meeting. While she was there at around 9 p.m., a coworker of hers, Conrad Bostrom, complained of having some pain. He was super fidgety, seemed to be in a lot of pain, and his arm looked a little bit weird. It got to a point where it was so severe that Dorothy offered to take him to the hospital with another coworker named Pam Head. In the emergency room at UC Irvine Medical Center, the doctors found that he had been bitten by a black widow spider.
We were just talking about them.
Oh my god, I didn't
Shut
even
the
think
fuck
about
up.
that. I forgot about your
That's so
research
funny.
paper on on the black widow spider. But yes, he had been bitten by a black widow spider. And at around 11 p.m. the same night, he started to recover and he was discharged. Pam stayed with him while he filled out some paperwork for insurance, while Dorothy went to fetch the car and bring it closer to the entrance so that he wouldn't have to exert too much effort when he walked. They saw Dorothy go to the car, but then they saw the car like racing towards them, and the headlights were blinding them. They were unable to see who was behind the steering wheel. They thought it was Dorothy, but despite their attempts to wave down the car, it sped past and took a sharp turn out of the parking lot. At first, Pam and Conrad believed that Dorothy's son may have had an emergency, but after hours of not hearing back from her, the two reported her missing. Pam and Conrad waited 2 hours for her to return, and when she didn't, they notified the hospital security and her parents. Authorities searched for her, but they turned up empty-handed in the days leading up to it and the weeks leading up to it. So the first major lead that police received was when it was reported that Dorothy had received numerous phone calls at work in the weeks before she vanished. She told a coworker that the unidentified caller watched her every move. She mentioned that he described specific details about her life, and so she believed that the calls were obviously not pranks at that point. They were very real.
What the?
Yes. The caller confessed his love for her and his plan to murder her. Dorothy's mother reported, quote, "One day he called and he said to go outside because he had something for her. She went out and there was a single dead red rose on the windshield of her car."
Did the police know?
Dorothy said that the voice of the person on the phone that kept calling her sounded like somebody she knew, but they never revealed their name or their location, and Dorothy just could never figure out who it could be. Dorothy's mom said one call in particular especially terrified her daughter, and it was because the man said, quote, he would get her alone and cut her up into bits so no one will ever find her.
Okay, what? They had to have told the police because. What?
I mean, I read a bunch of articles and none of them talked about her ever reporting these to the police. In my head, I'm thinking, of course, why wouldn't you? But due to, obviously, all of these horrifying calls, Dorothy decided that she was going to take some karate lessons. She started doing those just weeks before her disappearance, and then she also considered buying a handgun, but she had a 4-year-old son, and she didn't want him to accidentally harm himself. But she also worked closely with like the hippie community and was much more of a peace-loving woman than a gun-toting woman. At almost 4:30 a.m., several hours after the police were notified and began searching, on May 29th, Dorothy's car was found burning in an alley about 10 miles from the hospital, literally like engulfed in flames. Neither she nor the kidnapper were anywhere nearby.
It actually sounds like a movie.
4 years later, in August of 1984, a construction worker discovered Dorothy's skeletal remains were found about 30 feet from Santa Ana Canyon Road in Anaheim Hills. When police were brought in, they also discovered a watch that had been stopped at 12:30 a.m. on May 29th, 1980, and that was the same day that Dorothy had gone missing. The bones were partially burned after a brush fire had swept over the area in 1982, but they also found a turquoise ring. On August 14th, dental records were able to identify that remains were that of Dorothy Jane Scott. The autopsy could not identify her cause of death, and as just a little bit of a added terrible detail, when they were finding her body, it reignited her stalker. He called the house at least 2 more times, simply asking if Dorothy was home before hanging up.
Is he trying to make it seem like he didn't do it?
Excuse me, ma'am. Is she home? Another just like super weird tidbit was that Dorothy was actually found buried beneath the body of a dog. Obviously, this dog had no
What the
relation to
fuck?
her. Yeah, I know. She didn't have a pet. This dog had no relation to her. But for obvious reasons, the detail is usually just skimmed over. Most people don't think much of it, but after looking at a bunch of Reddit pages, there is some significance of this detail.
What?
Yes. In order to trick police dogs, people looking to hide bodies will bury them under a body of a dog or an animal, causing the police to see a false positive. They'll only dig until they find the animal carcass, leaving the murder victim undisturbed. So the killer likely knew this and went out of their way to hide the body just like this. So, about a week after her disappearance, and almost every Wednesday for about 4 years after she disappeared, the phone rang at her house with the same voice of the unidentified man who harassed her before. In the first call, the anonymous caller said, "I have her," before hanging up. The calls usually came when her mother was home alone. The caller would either say that he had her, or he killed her, that she'd been held captive, or he would just ask for her. "Hey, is Dorothy there?" Yeah, it doesn't seem very mentally stable. The phone calls were never long enough in duration for authorities to ever track the location. The calls did stop, however, in 1984 when Jacob, who is Dorothy's father, picked up the phone rather than her mom. After that, the stalker just quit calling.
No way.
So,
What did he say?
yeah, I think he just assumed that somebody else had moved into the house because he had never spoken to Dorothy's father before.
I thought he got like
But
scared or something.
no, I mean, he might have. There's really no reason to say why he stopped calling after that. Later, an unidentified man called the front desk at the Orange County Register, which is the people who released Dorothy's missing story. The managing editor shared with the police that the man said, quote, "I killed her. I killed Dorothy Scott. She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else. I killed her." So we do know somebody killed her, and it's her stalker, but we just don't know who he is.
First of all, I'm so shocked. Second of all, we still don't know?
No. The caller also went out of their way to give details on the clothing she was wearing, as well as what she was doing at the hospital, even though she'd only been away from other people very briefly. He seemed to know everything about her activities that day. Police quickly targeted the caller as a suspect, but were unable to find any more about him. Her disappearance and her death is still a mystery, and the identity of the caller also remains a mystery to this day. Before I go into some theories about what went down, there was one significant part that I didn't see covered in many different articles out there, but according to Ranker, there's one little odd tidbit about all of this, which indicates that Dorothy knew something was amiss prior to her disappearance. She made one stop on the way to the hospital by her parents' house. She checked on her son and let her parents know what she was doing, but then she was very particular to change her black scarf that she was wearing to a red one. No one knows why she did this, but it seemed important to her to change her scarf while she was there. Later, the stalker would make note of her red scarf that she was wearing that day, meaning he had seen her between her trip home and when she got to the hospital. So this
Oh
led
my
police to believe
God.
that it was the same stalker that killed her.
So how does no one know who he is?
That's the weird part. Even the coworker that was with her at the hospital, Pam, she said she was with Dorothy the entire time she was at the hospital. So there was no chance other than her going to her vehicle for somebody to snatch her up.
Unless it was her.
It was Pam all along, damn it. Even though the case was never solved, there's one very strong theory that's been floating around for quite some time. At Dorothy's place of employment, there was a man who sometimes came in by the name of Mike Butler. His sister also worked at the shop, and he became obsessed with Dorothy. He lived in the nearby mountains, and it was rumored that he was unstable and perhaps involved in cult activities. Dorothy's son believes that this man is the stalker and killer. Mike Butler had actually run into Dorothy's father before, so it could be that he didn't talk when Jacob answered the phone because he was afraid that the man would recognize his voice. He also had the opportunity to follow her and knew her schedule because it was linked closely to his sister's, and he'd have the excuse to come around the area. However, there is simply no hard evidence to back up Dorothy's son's theory, and that's literally all. That's where that theory ends. I do too.
I don't know. It's the only thing out there.
I mean, it is plausible. I think that's probably the most plausible one because of just the web. But Dorothy's baby daddy was also suspected for some time, but had an airtight alibi and was not investigated any further after that. Another theory that I want to talk about is that it was speculated that the case could have been connected to the disappearance of Patricia Jean Schneider, whose car was also found burned. Only 2 years after Dorothy, 25-year-old Patricia Schneider worked as a cocktail waitress at Palomino Station in Indiana Hills, California. Early on the morning of July 31st, 1982, she completed her shift at work. At about 3:45 a.m., she made a call from the Circle K in Pedley and said that her car had broken down. She was never to be seen or heard from again. Between 5 a.m. and 6 a.m. that morning, a sheriff's deputy found her Toyota Celica on fire in a field near the intersection of Van Buren Boulevard and Doolittle Avenue. The fire had been deliberately set, but Patricia has never been found. The only people that were considered suspects were the Circle K clerk who noticed two sandy-haired Caucasian men in the parking lot around the same time that she had vanished, but that was the only thing they had to go off of for her. But yeah, that is the whole case of Dorothy Jane Scott. Her friends described her, again, as I said in the beginning, as a church-going woman who was loving and dull as a phone book, if they were being brutally honest. There was nothing out of the ordinary about her, but while her life was painfully plain, her death would be something remembered for decades to come. Sadly, Dorothy's family would never get any answers. Jacob Scott, her father, passed away in 1994, and Vera Scott, who was their mother, passed away in 2002. Dorothy's son is a successful man and is still looking for answers to what happened to his mother when he was just 4 years old.
Yeah, I really hope this gets solved. I want to know who this man is so bad. It's
wild.
So
Same.
wild.
So the only thing we really have to go off of in terms of psychological profiling would be, well, stalking. So I'm going to go over just a few different tidbits about stalking. Stalking is defined as repeated and unwanted attention, harassment, contact, or any other behavior directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to feel fear. The neurotic nature of the stalker can take the form of harassing their targets, calling them repeatedly, as well as sending letters and gifts. If these are ineffective, the individual may escalate to more intrusive behaviors such as spying on and unexpectedly confronting their victims. Research tends to focus on how violating it is to bear the brunt of a stalker's obsessions, but there is little to explain what exactly motivates the stalker and how to therapeutically treat these offenders. Obviously, we are dealing with a full-blown stalker. He called repeatedly. He sent, quote unquote, gifts, if you consider that dead flower or something. And then he was spying and eventually did unexpectedly confront the victim. In 1993, Australian stalking expert Paul Mullen, how do you become a stalking expert? Which part of schooling you go through when you're like, all right, I've had it, I'm going to be a stalking expert. And that
Probably
is it.
the same school where you learn to put a dead body with a dead animal body.
Oh,
Whatever the
yeah,
hell
that was weird.
was.
So, Peter Mullen said that there were 5 subtypes of stalkers. I'll go over 2 of them now, and I'm only going to go over 2 of them because I think they're just the most logical that have to do with this case. He defined the rejected stalking type as an individual who has experienced the unwanted end of a close relationship, most likely with a romantic partner, but also with a parent, work associate, or acquaintance. When this stalker's attempts to reconcile fail, they frequently seek revenge. The other one that I'm going to go over is the intimacy-seeking stalker. The intimacy seeker identifies a person, often a complete stranger, as their true love and begins to behave as if they are in a relationship with that person. Many intimacy-seeking stalkers carry the delusion that their love is reciprocated. So, obviously, this man, if you think back to what he had said previously about it was his love, she was his, he saw her with another man, and that is why he basically ended up kidnapping and killing her. According to a 2012 study published in the journal Aggression and Violent Behavior, quote, motivations for stalking include a delusion belief in romantic destiny, a desire to reclaim a prior relationship, a sadistic urge to torment the victim, or a psychotic over-identification with the victim, and the desire to replace him or her. And stalkers can fall under the variety of diagnoses, including psychotic disorders, personality disorders, such as narcissistic personality disorder, and delusional disorders, such as erotomania, which is basically just the belief that another person, sometimes like a more prestigious one, maybe a celebrity, is in love with you. So those are kind of some of the different psychological ailments that stalkers can have, but because we don't know who this man is, we can't really diagnose him with something without knowing his purpose for all of this.
We can't properly diagnose him without him
Knowing
being properly
him.
diagnosed.
Literally. But lastly, different than the subtypes that the stalking expert Paul Mullen discovered, Troy McEwen, a clinical and forensic psychologist at Australia's Swinburne University of Technology, discovered the subtype of psychotic stalkers, which are disconnected from reality and can have detailed delusions about being in relationships with specific celebrities, strangers, colleagues, or acquaintances. Gallietta gave the example of a man she treated who met a woman in a coffee shop where they exchanged a few words. Quote, the delusional thinking was, I knew that she wanted to talk to me even more, even though she acted like she didn't. I saw her car parked on the left side of the street instead of the right side of the street. That was a special message to me. But yeah, so obviously that is not a sign to that person. And this guy who was stalking Dorothy had the same exact delusional thinkings. And that is all I have, honestly, about Dorothy Jane Scott. And I really hope that this is one of those cases that does eventually get solved, but I have a feeling it won't.
They're still like working on this.
That's just where I'm at with that. I really hope it does get solved. Again, if you or anybody you know, parents, grandparents, friends, aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors, acquaintances, know anything, the Anaheim Police is a good resource to reach out to.
Thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you for continuing to support us. Throw us on your Instagram stories. Show us that you're listening to the episode. Tag us. We'll repost you. We just wanna see who's listening. And we also want to know if you guys like fruity coffee or chocolatey coffee better. So tell us and give us some coffee recommendations because
I was just
we're
about to
running
say
out of
that.
ideas. Like, we can go outside of Tampa and Chicago because we order this stuff most of the time anyway. So give us recommendations from like your local city and we'll go online and buy it.
Yes, I know that not next week because that's Erica's episode, but the week after that, I was talking to some coworkers of mine and they are in the Oakland/Bay area, and they gave me a coffee and a case. So I will be doing that. Again, if you guys are anywhere, even if you're in a different country and you have a coffee, we will
Yes.
order it and we will try it, and it will be a great grand time. And you know what? I tried the whole no calf, half calf, and it was good. Listen, it was good. I had a good day. But I'll go full calf for all of you. Full calf.
Wow.
I'll even go extra calf.
What we won't do is go no calf.
That is what we won't do, because this is crime on caffeine. But thank you guys so much for listening and your continued support. As Erica said, keep following us on social media. Everything's just crime on caffeine. And yeah, don't forget to subscribe on Apple and Spotify, and you can leave a review on both of them, which would be super duper fun and cool. But other than that,
I'm excited for my case. It's going to be the week of Valentine's Day, so it has to relate to Valentine's Day somewhat. So I know what it is. And
We
it's going to
love
be
that.
another different case.
Get excited for Erica's case next week. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.